Hey Tigers, thanks for joining me today for reading class. Today we're going to continue our work on comparing and contrasting the most important points and key details in two texts that are on the same topic. So I wanted to do a topic that I thought was pretty interesting, and I started thinking about a story that my dad told me a few years ago. While he was down in Florida over winter break, he learned about a tournament that a local swampy kind of wetland area was having. And it was a pretty unusual tournament. The tournament was for people to find these giant snakes that were an invasive species. And they'd pull them out of the swamp, and the person who caught the most of these particular kinds of snakes won some prize money. I thought that was pretty interesting. So, our topic today is also going to be on invasive species, but you all know that I'm not a big fan of snakes, so I found something a little different. So, the idea of an invasive species is just a plant or an animal that has come to a new habitat that it doesn't belong in. And when it comes to this new habitat, it does great. In fact, it does so well, it takes over everything. And that's not good for the original environment. So that's what we're going to read about today. So this week we're going to be talking about two articles. The article we're going to look closely at right now is called Attack of the Lionfish. The lionfish is an invasive species. It's in a new place that it doesn't belong, and it's doing some damage. Let's go ahead and read about the invasive lionfish. As I start to read, I want you to keep something in mind. I'm going to be asking you what the most important point is or the main idea. How do I know when I've read a main idea? Well, I go ahead and I read through the entire texts, and then I stop and think, what did I just read about? Whatever my answer is, that's my main idea. So we're going to read Attack of the Lionfish, and I want you to think about, what did I just read about? And then we'll be able to fill in our first box together. Let's go ahead and read. Remember, you should be able to say, what did I just read about? All right, Attack of the Lionfish. Let's look at the picture. That's a picture of a lionfish. And this says, a lionfish in a picture taken at the zoo, Schönbrunn in Vienna, Austria. Very cool. Galveston, Texas. It sounds like a horror movie. A beautiful type of fish sweeps into the Gulf of Mexico, but its spines are poisonous and it's very hungry. It gobbles up everything in its path. Unfortunately for the native fish of the Gulf, the attack is very real. Lionfish are native to the South Pacific. They first showed up off the coast of southern Florida in 1985. Most likely, someone dumped a few out of a home fish tank. Since then, the fish have spread out to the eastern seaboard and down to the Bahamas. They breed frequently and have no natural enemies. Thanks to that, lionfish are more common now in the Bahamas than in their home waters. Uh-oh, is that a good thing or a bad thing? I think it's a bad thing. This impossible battle. Lionfish have been nearly a perfect predator, says Martha Klitsky. She works at the Reef Environmental Education Foundation, or REEF, in Florida. They're moving into new areas, and when they get settled, the population increases pretty quickly. The number of lionfish grew rapidly in the Florida Keys and the Bahamas in the past couple of years. Meanwhile, the number of native prey fish dropped sharply. Lionfish first appeared in the western Gulf of Mexico in 2010. Scientists spotted them in the Flower Garden Banks National Marine Sanctuary. Garden Banks is a protected area about 100 miles off the Texas coast. Now, scuba divers spot them nearly every time they explore a reef. Michelle Johnson is a government scientist monitoring fish in Galveston. She says that there are too many lionfish, yet to control their numbers is very difficult. It's kind of this impossible battle. Lionfish are interesting and beautiful. They grow to about 18 inches and have venomous spines. Their brown and white stripes are like those of a zebra. Lionfish hang near coral heads or underwater structures where reef fish flourish. They wait for prey fish to draw near, then they gulp them down in a flash. Eating almost anything. The fish can start making babies within 1 year. A single female can pump out 2 million eggs a year. Lionfish live about 15 years. Holy cow, that's a lot of lionfish. Whew. Predators and disease keep lionfish in check in the South Pacific. But here, other fish don't like them as food. The few groupers that have been tasting lionfish have spit them back out. The lionfish eat almost anything. They eat fish half their own size. They're eating so much that scientists say some are getting too fat. They can live almost anywhere in the water. They like little openings and holes. They find those places in coral heads, drilling platforms, and sunken ships. As long as they have something to eat, they'll be there, Johnson says. Too many lionfish can cause problems. In the Gulf, lionfish are eating the fish that keep the reefs clean. Without the fish, the coral and the reef may die. Boy, it sounds like this is a big problem, and they've told me all the ways that this lionfish could be a problem. So my thinking right now is, what are they going to do to solve this problem? Let's keep reading. Hunting the hunter. Klitsky at Reef says there's no way to get rid of all the lionfish, but their numbers can be controlled. One way is simply to take them out of the water. Lionfish fishing tournaments are popping up around the Caribbean and the Gulf. People are encouraged to catch and kill the fish. In some places, they cook them up. The tournaments have removed more than 12,000 lionfish since 2009. In the Gulf, scientists like Johnston have special permits that allow them to remove lionfish, but they need more help, and that takes divers, boats, and money. It's really an uphill battle, she says. The second you stop, they come back. All right, friends. Let's go back to our organizer. Remember, this is kind of like a Venn diagram, and we're right now focusing on the side that it says attack of the lionfish. I'm going to stop and think, what did I just read about? I think we read about lionfish and how they are an invasive species. And what are people doing about it? Sounds like they're having tournaments to catch them. Kind of like my story about my dad, or what he heard. So let's go ahead and write that down where it says most important point or the main idea. I'm going to go ahead and say lionfish are an invasive species in, it says Florida and like the Texas, so in the Gulf. People are trying to control their numbers by having fishing tournaments. Okay, so that's what I read about. Now I need to go back and think about some key details. What was important as I read? Let's go back and look together. As I look at this article, I know that this first section is my introduction, and that's where I'm going to learn some pretty important background information before the author actually starts to talk about the article. So let's go through and see if there's some things that are going to be important here that might help us. The first thing I want to make note of is that they don't belong in Southern California. Right here it says that someone probably dumped them out of their fish tank. So I think it's important to know that these invasive species didn't just swim here. We humans did this. We caused this problem. Oh, let's try that again. Here we go. All right, so we caused the problem. It's also important to notice that they breed frequently and don't have any natural enemies. Uh-oh, that means their population goes up and nothing is eating them to control that population. So let's add that to our important details. We can say they don't belong in this environment. They have lots of babies. And we can also say they don't have any predators or any natural predators anyway. Okay. I didn't do that one right. There we go. All right, let's go back to our text. Let's go through this second section called the impossible battle. What was this all about? Well, I read that it was difficult to control their numbers. It says that right here. Make sure we've got our... She said that there's too many lionfish and it's difficult to control their numbers. And they have been eating lots of the fish that live on the reef. So let's go ahead and add that to our details. So their population is difficult to control. They eat reef fish and live anywhere. That's a bad recipe there. Let's go to the next section. Let's pull out some important things here where it says eating almost anything. Well, it talks about how their population goes up very quickly, and we've already mentioned that. Did we already mention that they have no natural predators? Yep. Let's keep looking. They can live almost anywhere. I just wrote that down. And, oh, this is interesting. This last part here, I think it's important to note that too many of these lionfish can cause problems, and the problems include eating those reef fish, and without those fish, the coral and the reef might die. That's a problem. I'm going to go back up here because I'm going to note that that is a super big problem. So I'll write the problem is that they eat too many of the reef fish that protect the coral and reef. The reef could die. All right, I think I really understand the problem about these invasive species. They're really dangerous to this habitat. So like I thought before, what are they going to do about it? I think that's what our last section or heading was all about. Hunting the hunter. So they say the best way to get rid of them is to take them out of the water. How do you get fish out of the water? You go fishing. So it looks like they have these tournaments where they take fish out of the water. So let's add that here. The best way to get rid of them is to take them out of the water by fishing for them. All right, so I think I have a pretty good idea of what I've been reading about. I read about the lionfish, how it's an invasive species, it's not supposed to be there, and it's taking over an area. And that causes problems for the local fish and marine life. All right, now let's turn our attention to the second article called Driving Away Problem Animals and Plants. I'm going to read it to you, and I'm going to have some time to pause and think about what's most important. So, as I read Driving Away Problem Animals and Plants, I want you to stop and think, what did I just read about? And whatever you just read about, whatever your answer is, that's our main idea. So let's go ahead. I'm going to read it, and you guys are going to stop and do some thinking. All right, driving away problem animals and plants. Let's look at the photo. Hey, that's a lionfish, isn't it? I don't know what in the world this crazy looking contraption is. Let's see. This photo, provided by Roberts in Service of the Environment, taken April 18th, 2017, shows the first day a new robot was used to hunt dangerous and invasive lionfish in Bermuda. It stuns a lionfish with an electric current, and then the fish is vacuumed into a container alive, and it can later be sold for food. Interesting. Let's see how this picture matches our text. Remember, you're supposed to be thinking, what did I just read about? Washington, D.C. Every area in nature has a special balance of living things. If the balance is broken, plants and animals can struggle to live. Sometimes animals and plants move to new places. This can change the special balance of the new area. Invasive species can spread quickly. Newly arrived animals and plants can cause huge problems. Scientists call these problem animals invasive species. They spread quickly in a way that hurts other species. Invasive species are often brought to new areas by humans. Many invasive species are not hunted by other humans. This means they can easily grow and have many children. They may eat all the food that other animals need. Now, new forms of technology are coming out. The technology is helping to get rid of unwanted creatures. Hunting the lionfish. The lionfish is from the Pacific Ocean. Now it has spread all over the east coast of the United States. Lionfish are not hunted by any other animal in the Atlantic Ocean. It can swim freely here. It eats as many fish as it wants. Now, a new underwater robot is hunting the lionfish. The robot was created by Colin Angle. He runs a company called iRobot. He and his team are making robots into tools to help the environment. The new robot sends out a shock. This stuns the lionfish. Then the fish gets sucked into a tube. It can then get sold to restaurants and made into food. Okay, so that section's about lionfish. Ooh, brown tree snakes. Let's read this section. Guam is an island in the Pacific Ocean. Recently, native birds started disappearing from Guam. Scientists were puzzled at first. Then they found the reason why. Brown tree snakes were hunting them. The snakes are not from Guam. They came there recently. The snakes were eating all the birds and their eggs. Because the snakes had no natural enemies in Guam, nothing ate them. Trapping them was not working. However, the snakes did have one weakness. It was the painkiller pill, Tylenol. The pill would kill the snakes. Scientists came up with a plan. They glued the painkiller pill to 3,000 dead mice. Then they dropped the mice from helicopters. They left the mice hanging in the trees where the snakes live. The pills killed many of the snakes. I'm starting to see a pattern in this article where it talks about a specific invasive species and then how technology is helping to get rid of it. Are you noticing this too? Let's see if that works for our last section or not. Using electricity to shock the Asian carp. The Asian carp is a fish that has taken over rivers and lakes in the central United States. To fight them, government wildlife workers are using a specialized boat. It has giant wing-like nets. These nets send out an electric shock underwater. The electricity shocks the fish, said scientist Emily Fiergo. After a shock, some of the fish are killed and float to the surface. Later, they turn into fertilizer for the soil and help grow plants. All right, so let's do some thinking. What did we just read about? Well, I didn't just read about lionfish, and I didn't just read about brown tree snakes or the Asian carp. What do those three creatures all have in common? You're right, they're all invasive species. Did they solve the problem of these invasive species in the same way? No, they didn't. So let's do some thinking. What did I just read about? What's the most important idea? Can you tell me what you read about? Go ahead and type it into your document called RI 3.9 Lionfish. Type it there, pause the video, and come back. All right, welcome back. Let's go ahead and continue doing some thinking about some details. If you wrote down that this article was about how invasive species are taking over different areas and people are now using different kinds of technology to get rid of them, you're right on track. Now we need to find some details that support this idea. Let's go back into the text and pull some out. All right, let's look at our introduction. Our introduction was short, but it reminded us of what an invasive species really is. It's an animal that comes to a new habitat and causes an unequal or an unbalanced ecosystem after coming. It does bad things to its new environment. So let's do some thinking. Our first section right here, what was it all about? Can you use the heading to help you? I think we can. I want you to reread this section, and I want you to think, what did I just read about? What was really important in this section called Invasive Species Can Spread Quickly? Then add it to your Google Docs where it says Key Details. You can pause the video and do so now. All right, welcome back, third graders. Let's go on to the next section called Hunting the Lionfish. What was this section all about? Go ahead and reread it. What did you read about? Was it just about lionfish? Or was it about what we're doing to lionfish to get rid of them? Can you add some details to our diagram? What did you just read about? Go ahead and pause the video and type your response. Welcome back, third graders. The next section was called Brown Tree Snakes Hunt Native Birds. Go ahead and reread just this section. What did you read about? Can you answer it? You can't just write down brown tree snakes. You've got to talk about what that problem is and how someone is trying to solve that problem. Once you have your response, go ahead and add it to our Google Doc under the section called Key Details. Go ahead and pause the video to do so now. Let's go ahead, welcome back third grade, and go to the very last section called Using Electricity to Shock the Asian Carp. Reread this small section and ask yourself, what did I just read about? And add it to our key details on our document. Remember, be sure to mention the invasive species and what people are doing to get rid of this species. Now you're going to be ready to talk about how these two articles are similar. We will go ahead and work on that section now. Go ahead and look at the most important point of both the article called Attack of the Lionfish and the article called Driving Away Problem Animals and Plants. Are there any similarities between the two? How are these articles' big ideas alike? I think you can probably think of at least one way. You can fill that in here now. And then let's move on to the next section, key details. What were some things that they talked about in the lionfish article that are also mentioned in the article called Driving Away Problem Animals and Plants? What were some things that were the same? Can you think of at least 5 things that they say that are the same in both articles? I look forward to seeing your responses. If you need help on this, you can go ahead and go back and rewatch this section of the video. I look forward to seeing your responses. Have a great day, Tigers.